going to talk with Abe. He, him, has a question about God being all-knowing and free at the same time. Well, hey, Abe, what you got for us?
Hi, how are you guys?
Good. How are you?
Good. Sorry, I was delayed.
First of all, I'd like to tell everybody, listening and watching to, of course, like and subscribe.
Oh yeah, heck yeah! You've already got an extra minute of airtime for that. Keep it up, brother.
All right, great. So it says in the Bible that God is all-knowing and all-powerful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So
well,
God,
that's the takeaway, at least.
Right. So God being all-powerful means that God has free will. So if God has free will, God can't be all-knowing and have free will at the same time. Because if he already knows what's going to happen, then he doesn't have a choice. And if he changes his mind, then he already knows that he's going to change his mind. So what's your opinion on that argument?
Yeah, I think in general this idea of omniscience and having the ability to really choose in the meaningful sense that people are talking about when they talk about free will, I don't think that they work together. I mean, this idea of like, God knows what you would do, and I think it's Molinism is that kind of like middle ground thing. That a lot of
God knows what like circumstances you'd be placed in, which just gives antecedents that determine the thing you would. I know
it feels. I'm pretty with you on this, Abe. It feels like these ideas clash with each other pretty hard. At the very least, and this depends, of course, on the type of individual that you're speaking with. I've had these conversations and they've gone, a couple of ways because, not everybody has the same definition of a deity, right? Even from the Bible. And so I've asked Christians before, like, hey, is there anything that restricts God from doing an action, right? And they're like, no, God can freaking do anything. God is, all powerful, right? And I go, cool. Can God do something logically contradictory, right? And if they say yes, then they kind of have to deal with the fact that there is at least something that seems to be, controlling God. God is subject to the laws of logic, or God must adhere to the laws of logic. I literally talked with a guy for 10 minutes where I just asked the exact same question, just changed the word over and over and over until finally he was like, yeah, okay, that might be an issue. If they say that God can do illogical things, the first thing I would do is I would probably point them towards a handful of different apologists and be like, hey, the vast majority of people in this space don't accept that. They have a different answer for it, and, strengthen your argument. Because if God can do illogical things, then it just kind of throws out the whole conversation. Because God can always do, God can break the rules of non-contradiction and identity. So how the fuck do we have this conversation about something that both is and is not itself? Like
I've had those conversations. They're called dialetheists, or people that hold to that there are some true contradictions. It's called dialetheism.
That's fascinating.
And there's people like Graham Priest, who's a philosopher. He's not a Christian. He's not a theist, I don't think, but he thinks that there are true contradictions, like the liar's paradox, for example. And so if you meet a Christian that just bites the bullet on dialetheism, well, then one, I'm just really confused about the view, and all sorts of Trinity starts to make a whole hell of a lot more sense. It does. It still doesn't make sense, but it's like, okay, you concede my issues, but you embrace them. Okay, that's great. Right. One thing to be said about this, Abe, there's one thing to be careful on. I don't think it depends on how you word the argument. If you go like really into it and you're like, God's a necessary being and necessarily he knows this thing, you have a worry about what's called I think it's called a modal shift fallacy, where you shift one of the operators like necessity over where it's not really doesn't formally kind of translate that way. So there's a worry there. I don't think a lot of people are putting these like really robust arguments in that way. So that's one thing you probably just don't have to worry about. But two, there's different notions of omniscience. And I don't know if a lot of people know this or if they get into the weeds on this, but Abe, are you familiar with the concept called open theism?
No.
Yeah, so you might have a worry about this, presenting this argument to a theist who openly and gladly calls themselves, like I have a friend named Fan. He's an open theist. And so what they believe is that God is omniscient. But in the future, actions like Mike will eat a sandwich, or God will smite whoever, or tell Saul to go, kill a bunch of infants. When you talk about those propositions in the future, they're not actually propositional. They can't be true or false. They're not bivalent, right? They're not even something that could be true or false. So knowing the future isn't a propositional attitude you can take. It's not something that you could know, right? And so God is, under their view, omniscient. He knows all true propositions, but he doesn't know the future because the future is unknowable, right? Even for God. And so you're going to have to worry about that type of response for some people who hold to that. Sorry?
I said, but if God's outside of space and time, then he knows everything that already happened and everything that will happen. I would say.
Well, I'm trying to put my theist hat on and what a theist might say to you. And if you get an open theist, they're going to be like, well, look, God doesn't know what he will do at that point. But I think one thing to focus on is looking at the scripture and the text. And it's like, well, do you really believe this? Like, because I'm wondering if open theism is like scriptural or even, has a place in your theology, given that there's points in the text you can point out where God like knows something will happen in the future and then he's right about it. Right. So there is that worry, or like, hey, only the Father, knows the time. Right. That's, I think, was that Matthew or something. And that's a future event, and God knows the future event. So there's a worry there. But I mean, most theists that you run into aren't probably going to hold that view. And if they do, I think that there's maybe some theological or scriptural concerns you can point their way. But yeah, I would just, that's really all I have to offer. Like, I personally think that there's an issue with what you're bringing up, right? Or like my free will. But when you get an open theist, or you get these people that are, they're very active in the scene of trying to how to figure this out and get rid of the problem, you're going to run into these kinds of people, Molinists and open theists and stuff like that.
So I asked a theist about it, and he said, we just don't understand, which I really hate that. Why would they believe in it if they don't understand?
You'll get that most of the time.
Not the best answer. But
0.1% of the time, if you go around doing this, you'll find somebody who's like looked into open theism, right? It's like not going to happen for most people. But if you get into the circles that I get into, like online debating outside of just like, Facebook stuff or your friends, you're going to run into a lot more philosophically minded theists, and they're going to cling to that shit for dear life. Like, they're going to cling on to that shit for dear life. And it's really good to know things when they tell you, oh, well, I'm a Molinist. It's really good to know, oh, well, what do you think about the grounding problem of Molinism, right? Or the grounding objection to Molinism? How do you get around that? It's good to know that stuff, because it's like, you have 40 chess on the stuff that they're like really trying to make the, puzzles fit in a way, if that makes sense. But I'm probably going longer than I should, because this is probably like 0.1% of the people you'll ever talk to.
I think it was really good. I think it clarified some stuff, and hopefully it did for you, Abe.
Another question I have for you guys is totally random, but I was just curious, what is your opinion on veganism? Are you guys vegan?
You're trying to throw grenades before you leave.
Divide the audience.
I'll let JMike give his answer real quick, and then yeah.
That's great. I'm so happy I get to go first. So my best friends that I met online, actually, they become like my best friends, and one of them lives really close to me. So unfortunately I bailed on him yesterday because I had some plans. I'm poor at planning things, but he's a vegan, and pretty much everybody, like, two of his friends that I met on there, they came up from Florida and we all hung out, and they're all vegans. I'm the only one not a vegan. My view on veganism, I guess, is pretty simple. I'm an anti-realist with morality. So like, I think there are moral facts, but they're indexed to what I think, right? A moral fact is something like JMike thinks that murdering babies is wrong, right? That's a moral fact. It's indexed to me. That's what I think. And in my view, I think it is immoral. by my own lights, to slaughter animals in the millions and consume them and use their products. Am I a vegan? No. Am I inconsistent with my own moral system? Yes. Right. I kind of just feel that I've been so conditioned on this that it's really hard for me. I don't eat a burger and feel bad about it. If I reflect on it, I can, but there's something there with me that's just doesn't move me over the kind of the needle, so to speak. And my buddy Amdir actually challenged me. He was like, if you're not vegan within 2 weeks, I'm challenging you to a debate on like a really high debate platform so I can destroy you on veganism. And I'm like, well, that'll be an easy debate because I'll just come in there and say, I lose. So, by my own lights. But yeah, I tend to argue against non-vegans, even though I'm not a vegan. So
yeah, and I am not a vegan myself. I think there are a lot of really good arguments for the reduction of harming of animals. I've actually talked about this just kind of in my personal life for a really long time, even before I ever engaged in like this type of stuff online and, you know, listened to vegan debates and all that jazz. So I've, you know, talked about animal welfare in general. I think one of the issues that I often have with veganism in the actual conception itself is I have heard many vegans who use the definition of veganism to mean the reduction of animal suffering as is practicable, as is most practicable, basically. So what that means to me is that there can be two individuals who very much agree that we should reduce animal harm, and one of those individuals being totally a vegan, absolutely eschews all animal products ever, and the other person who very much is following the tenets of veganism, so to speak, of veganism, eats cows regularly and slaughters them personally. Both of those people under that definition are actually vegans. They very much could be. And I think that's problematic if you have an idea that in and of itself can actually lead to contradictory conclusions like that. So again, that's a really nitpicky problem. I think in general, I think probably 90 some odd % of the arguments from the vegan side are things that I'm totally on board with. You know, you're never going to find me arguing for, what do you call them? Like factory farms and stuff, right? CAFOs and stuff, like never, not good. Like the lakes of pig shit in North Carolina, bad. I am not a fan of that. You know, just killing animals just for the sake of it, just for the funsies. Like, no, absolutely horrible. Should we not eat honey because it's immoral? That's a bit tougher one for me, for sure.
As somebody who's like willing, just straight openly saying I'm inconsistent with my own view here.
Yeah.
The honey thing is something I would just like, come on, are you serious?
Right. That's how I feel. Now, but in fairness, there have been a good handful of folks, you know, well-known, you know, activists or thinkers in the space that have gone, you know, through weeks and weeks of back and forth with themselves about whether or not they should use certain medication like, you know, ibuprofen or something because of the negative harm that the creation of that medicine had on animals, you know? So like these are things in that space. I kind of agree with you there, JMike. I feel like if we're arguing about the eating of the honey thing, I feel like maybe we're missing the forest through the trees there. But yeah.
Scientists just figure this out, get lab meat cheap and like,
man, right, though?
I'll be on board.
Like, how cool would that freaking be? You know, seriously, I am so excited to see more and more lab grown meat stuff because I really do think that takes so much of this out of the playing field now.
I agree with you. I mean, look, I got an Impossible Burger today.
Hey, there you go.
No joke. I got one.
There you go.
And I will prefer to get one if the option's there.
Yeah.
And the more these conversations with people. I'm like, all right, let me just start, even if I don't really like feel like I care that much, let me just start doing this because I know on reflection I will, and so let's try it. But God, if we just had lab meat, it would just solve so much crap for me if it was cheap and good. And I'm like, I don't got a lot of money, so you know what I mean.
And that's the thing. It's the availability factor, right? And the taste. The taste is a massive issue for people in this conversation. And like, if you really do believe that we cannot make lab grown meat taste fucking incredible, then oh my gosh, you have not been paying attention to the foods around the world for all of human history. There have been parts of society that have been actively eating rancid fish for just generations. Like, do you know what scrapple is? Do you know what scrapple is? I am a Southern boy to my core, and I'm telling you, go look that shit up and tell me that we can't figure out a way to make absolutely anything delicious and edible, because that is what we did with that. But Abe, I know we just kind of rambled there at the end. You threw it. You lobbed a bomb. You lobbed a bomb for us, and now we're going to receive probably very angry phone calls because JMike and I are perpetuating the torture of animals or giving credence to vegans. I don't know.
Both sides of the field.
That's what I feel. I feel like we did a good job. You know, I feel like we did.
I'm good. I tried to appease everybody.
That's right. That's what we do. Any other thoughts for us, Abe?
You know, I myself am not vegan, and I'm about to go eat some chicken, but I have one more thought.
All right, one more.
So they say that we're paying people to kill animals, but we're not. We're paying people to give us the animals they already killed. So it's not like we're actually killing animals. They're already dead. They already got the meat, so we're just taking advantage of that.
Yeah, and again, this isn't necessarily my stance, but I would bet the argument back to that would be something along the lines of, but if you aren't paying for the meat product, you know, the end result of that death, then the farmer's incentive to slaughter the animals to begin with wouldn't be there, so they wouldn't slaughter them, you know. It's a very long conversation for sure, Abe. But
it's not an easy one to win. Like, trust me, I've tried to do the name the trait stuff, and that
one's real tough. That one's really tough. Other than just being selfish and just being like, I'm anthropocentric. What can I say? I value humans over snails.
Species essentialism.
That's right. Species essentialism, baby. That's all we can do. But Abe, thank you so freaking much. That was a great call. I really enjoyed that. And possibly one of the first times in a while that we've talked about veganism on this show that didn't result in us calling each other mean names. So